Today I am reading Today I am reading from the 10th book in the Left Behind series. The name of this book is The Remnant on the Brink of Armageddon, and chapter 3 is what we'll be reading today. We were with the group that had the leaders, Costas Papa explained, the pastor and his wife, the Mikloses, old man Kronos. His cousin is still with us. You know who all these people are? We know everything, Chloe said. But how can you know so much and still survive? Marcel told us the plan the night it happened, Mrs. Pappas said. The girl was supposed to have been seen by people in the underground who knew her, but it was just a rumor. Everything seemed to add up. Help from the Tribulation Force, a military man, an operative from America, on his way back from the operation in Israel. But how did you learn what had happened? What did you do when Mr. Miklos and Mr. Kronos did not check back in? We went looking, Costas said, his lips quivering. Chloe had thought him a bumbling lookout, then an angry young man, but he had to be brave, she decided, to live as he did. This softness touched her. We knew the plan. We never found the stones at the side of the road. They had either been run over or brushed away, but those animals left that car right where it stopped, not far from there, in plain sight. But surely they were watching it, Hannah said, lying in wait for you. We were sure of that, the boy said. We drove past quickly, trying to appear as if we were not even looking, but we know Kay's car. It was just a few meters off the road. The lights gone dim, the engine off, a door open. We were desperate to search it, to find out what happened, but we didn't want to be stupid. And so we waited. We had to. There was no way to know when they would tire of waiting for someone to come. But after a few days, we could not stand not knowing anymore. Kronos' cousin lent us a four-wheel drive truck, and from topography maps, we plotted a way to get to the car from the fields rather than the road. We did it after midnight, slowly making our way from tiny trails through thick woods to the open rocky plain. Cousin Kronos drove, and two others and I walked ahead in dark clothes to be sure no one saw or heard. It had to be 3 a.m. before we had brought the truck as close as we dared. We could not see Kronos' car yet, but we knew where it was. When we crawled over a rise where we thought it would come into view, we saw nothing. There is no longer money for street lights, and the battery in the car had long since died. There was no moon, and we didn't dare use our flashlights. So nothing illuminated the car. If the GC were waiting to ambush us, they would not have thought of our coming the hard way, especially that far. We were almost upon the car when we finally saw it in the darkness. We listened and watched and even fanned out to see if we could hear any GC. Then we felt in the car and found the bodies. Maybe we were foolish, but we dared shine our lights, just seconds at a time, our bodies hiding most of the light. Costas quivered at the memory and broke down. He struggled to be understood. All three of them he managed, shot. Marcel in the face, back of his head gone. We had to work to pull him from under the dashboard. Kay took one in the neck from behind, probably cut his spinal cord. Laszlo's in the forehead. No sign of the American? Costas shook his head. We dragged the bodies one by one all the way back to the truck. They stank and were stiff. It was awful. My friend, who was studying criminology before all of this, determined that whoever shot them was probably in the car with them. We also found Marcel's bag, one we had given him. It was under Laszlo's body, covered with his blood. It still had a change of clothes and food in it. We do not know what happened to the American. Chloe told him and his mother what Steve Plank had reported, that the GC boasted the successful thought of an escape attempt. There was an impostor for the girl and for our man. Something went wrong, and all this resulted. The American is alive, Mrs. P said. Chloe nodded. Being held somewhere. They're probably trying to break him for information. But he's well trained. We're more worried he will get himself killed for not cooperating. You must think the GC is stupid, Costas said. Sorry, Chloe said. You come here disguised as GC and you think they will just take you to him? It's risky, we know. It's suicide, Costas said. What would you do, son? Chloe said, realizing that if Costas was younger than she, it wasn't by much. He shrugged. The same, I suppose, but I can't imagine it working. We have a man inside the palace in New Babylon, or we wouldn't dream of trying this, Chloe said. She began to outline the preparations and Mac's plans. Oh, excuse me, Hannah said. A minute, please. Chloe glanced at her, then followed Hannah to a corner. Chloe, do they need to know this? We can trust them. They're co-op. But what if they are caught and forced to talk? Don't burden them with all of this. Think of what they've been through, Hannah. They'll never cave. Well, if they do, it's more than just your funeral, you know. They returned to Mrs. Pappas and her son. This works, Costas said. The GC falls for this? Not for long, Chloe admitted, sneaking a peek at Hannah. But with the right setup on the main database in New Babylon, we have bluffed ourselves into some remarkable places. We just met you, Mrs. Pappas said, and we will bury you soon. We are people of faith, Hannah said, dropping her accent, and we know you are too. We must also be people of action. We know the odds and we accept them. We don't know what else to do. Would you leave a comrade to a certain death? Cautious was still emotional. He shrugged. I don't know. I don't see that you have a choice, but you have a better chance going in with artillery than with disguises. I just can't see it working. But we don't know where our man is, Chloe said. How do we find that out without it infiltrating? What about your man in Colorado? He seems to know so much. He can tell us only what he overhears. If he asks for more details than seem appropriate, he'll soon be found out too. How does he get along in the GC without the mark? Chloe explained Steve's new identity and facial reconstruction, aware of Hannah's loud sigh and slight shaking of her head. His forehead is plastic. The mark of loyalty would have to be applied under that, and no one can stand looking at him with his skull exposed. Please, Hannah said under her breath. I want to come with you when you go for your man, Costas said. Can't allow it, Chloe said. We have our papers, our uniforms, and we're covered for now on the computer. It would take days to do the same for you. I could get a GC uniform and you could cover for me. No, Chloe said. We appreciate it, but it's not going to happen. We have a plan and we will follow it, succeed or fail. You need more firepower? We do. It would have looked suspicious bringing in heavy weapons that are not GC issue. Mr. McCollum is trying to get. Where is the car? According to Plank, Sebastian's captors also have his car, which he talked his way into at the airport. And they wouldn't have searched it for weapons? We don't know, and we haven't heard. Costas motioned the women to follow him to a corner where a large wood trunk was buried under piles of blankets. It was full of Uzis. Don't ask, he said. His mother provided a large laundry bag into which Costas placed 3 cloth-wrapped weapons and several clips of ammunition. Now you'd better go. George Sebastian had been told that you never hear the shot that kills you. But how could that ever be? Proved. He fought to remain composed, not wanting to give his captors the satisfaction of even tensing before the death blast. He heard his breath way past what he believed. were his final 10 seconds, and then could not contain a shiver as he exhaled. All right, the leader said, get him presentable and fast. Food and water first, then the shower, and do something about this lip. Think of a story for that. We didn't do it. George opened his eyes and blinked. You're still in trouble, California, but none of us is getting fired because of you. I'm taking the cuffs off, but you got two weapons aimed at you, and all we need is a reason. When his hands were free, George rubbed them together, making Plato flinch. George was tempted to scare him with a feigned swing or even a shout. Do something about his wrists, the leaders told Elena. Let's go. We got to move. They shoved George up the steps and gave him two sandwiches stuffed with what tasted like summer sausage. The bread slices were nearly 2 inches thick and dry. He had to press them hard together over the meat to fit them in his mouth. His split lips stretched and bled as he chewed. He sucked eagerly from a bottle of warm, stale water. George wanted to sit back and take a few deep breaths, but this was clearly not supposed to be a leisurely lunch. He gagged and coughed, but he made sure to force down all the food. His best chance to escape or do some damage would be when he was unbound and they were moving him. He didn't want to invest the mental energy guessing what it was all about, but he felt relieved to be alive and to have accomplished his one objective so far, silence. When he finished, George quickly scooped breadcrumbs from the table and pushed them into his mouth. He chased them with the last few drops of water, tipping the bottle all the way up. Elena snatched it from him and pointed toward a tiny room where he would just barely fit into a shower. Close there, she said, pointing to the floor. You probably can't fit through the window anyway, but someone will be outside and armed. She left and shut the door. And though he knew she and probably the others could hear what he was doing, he looked under a cot and found only dust. He yanked open 3 drawers of a spindly wooden dresser. Empty. There was nothing else in the room except a window. He guessed faced west. He pulled back a paper-like shade, and Socrates leveled his weapon at him. Get going, Elena called from outside the door. He shed his clothes and edged into the shower. He turned on the left faucet first and was blasted with icy water. He stepped back out and reached in, trying the other, also cold. He turned both on and let them run a minute. He tried angling the shower head away from him, but it was rusted into place. The tap water is not drinkable, he heard from outside. He wanted to ask if there was soap or a towel, but he would not speak. Gritting his teeth, George forced himself under the spray. His body jerked and shook, but he let the frigid water flood him from his short hair to his whole body. He vigorously rubbed everywhere for as long as he could stand it, and just as he was turning off the water, he heard the room door shut. He peeked out. Where his clothes had been lay a pile of clean stuff, clearly belonging to Plato, his supposed look-alike. Great, he doesn't appear nearly as tall. A single hand towel lay on the bed. George made it work and threw on the clothes. A nondescript undershirt protected him from a prickly brown sweater. Military issue underwear was tight. Gray wool socks started to warm him, and khaki pants with a canvas belt were tied around the middle and rode 3 inches above his ankles. The GC issue boots were snug but okay. George pushed the door open, and Elena motioned that he should follow her back to the table where he had eaten. Plato stood watching, weapon in hand, but George wondered how valued the girl was. He could have had her in a headlock before the others noticed, and he could have killed her before they fired. She awkwardly dabbed at his lip with ointment and massaged his hands and wrists. He studied her face for any signs of weakness. The blood he had seen on her when he thought she was his underground contact was obviously not her own. She was a killer. Elena pressed a bulge over his eyebrow that smarted, but George would not recoil. If he couldn't stand a little pain, how would he fight his way out of this? It seemed incongruous that she could find ice in that place, but she wrapped some in a cloth and held it against his swollen forehead. She did the same to a knot on the back of his head. Why couldn't she have spared a cube or two for his drinking water? The food, whatever it was, lay heavy and troubling in his stomach, but he also felt a surge of energy from it. Part of him wanted to do some damage to show these yokels what an American captive was capable of. Oh, he could do more than clam up. He had already broken one guard's knee, if he had to guess, and all during his administering to his wounds, George had sat close enough to Elena to have blinded her with a two-fingered shot to the eyes, broken her jaw with a punch to the chin, or crushed her to death by flipping the table onto her and dropping his whole body atop it. Little would have been gained, of course, as he would have been shot. He fantasized about ignoring her and charging Plato, disarming him, butting him with the weapon, shooting Elena, and taking his chances with the two camped outside. That had better odds, but still not good ones. They were making him presentable and moving him. Why? Someone above them must have wanted to try eliciting information, and they wanted to be sure he was being treated right. George was apparently as close as they had come to anyone connected with the Judites, and that was why he was still alive. He relished the idea of performing for GC brass. His silence would infuriate them. Better, from his perspective, the higher up you went, the less prepared they were for creative escape attempts. At some point, these people would realize he was not going to help them. There would be no information volunteered or beat from him. Finally, at long last, he would be expendable. They would either use him as an object lesson, claiming he had ratted out the enemy, or they would execute him, or both. George's goal formed slowly in his mind. He wanted to stay alert, to be aware of every nuance. He wanted to know when the GC finally lost patience and realized he was a hopeless lost cause. Because when they had finally had enough and his end had come, he wanted to be sure to take one or two with him into eternity. He knew from their marks they wouldn't be going where he was, but they'd get to their destination sooner than they thought. George had to fight a smile as they led him to a jeep. He was cuffed again, but not until after he had been fitted with a large pair of gloves. How thoughtful, he decided. Protect my tender wrists. By the time Mac rendezvoused with Chloe and Hannah at a clearing in the woods north of Potomac, all had been in touch with the rest of the tribulation force. I can't wait to see how New Babylon spins Petra, Hannah said. How can anyone remain an unbeliever now? Who knows when Daddy and Abdullah will be able to leave, Chloe said. For all we know, Tyson will want to stay there. If they have the technology to let him continue cyber teaching around the world, I have to think the GC will kill anybody who leaves. Mac told Chloe and Hannah that squadron headquarters in Potomac was expecting him, but that he wanted to downplay everything. How so? Chloe said. Sounds like your way has been paved. Yeah, but if I go in there, buttons shining, it's like I'm on display, trying to impress. I could give off the smell of a rat without even trying. Plus, if that headquarters is anything like the rest of this place, I'm going to look suspicious if I don't start ripping on anybody who's supposed to be in charge. Tell us about it, Hannah said. I hated working at the palace, but the organization and decorum made this place look sick. If I was really a senior commander, I'd be pushing paper to New Babylon for a week about this place. I had hoped to just rush in there, get what I needed, and get going. I wasn't even going to ask them for any support because I ought to need it. Now, I'm of a mind not to even show up. What? Myself, I mean. Us, then? One of you. I'll go, Hannah said. Now, wait a minute, Chloe said. Frankly, I'm leaning toward Chloe myself, Hannah. I don't expect any suspicion, but if worse come to worse and they checked your iris on your handprint, you know you're on file in the palace as a dead woman. Well, yeah, but then how would you explain an Indian lady having the exact ID marks of a dead Native American? As long as it's not that you don't think I can pull it off. You're kidding. Half the time I look at you and forget who you are. But Chang has entered Chloe's readings under her name, her new name, so even if they got feisty and made a member of my executive staff prove her identity, she'd sail through. What do you want me to do, Mac? Chloe said. I want you to be bored, and irritated. You got grunt duty. While the fat cat boss you came in with and his other personnel are taking a nap at a nice place, where is none of anybody's business, you got assigned to go get the info he needs. Any red tape, any hold up at all, and you're ticked off. Can you work that up? What do you think? Your approach is that this is bottom end stuff. Just give me the info and let me be on my way. Make sure the hostage takers know we're coming so they don't get spooked, but they'd better have their man ready. The boss is none too pleased that they haven't gleaned anything from him yet, so make way for somebody who knows what he's doing. Gotcha. That flyboy friend of Abdullah's believes if everything goes well, we can take Sebastian. In cuffs, of course, right back to his own plane and fly out of here tonight. Does Local have any idea you're planning to take the prisoner? No, and by the time they find out, we ought to be out of here. Not going to be easy, Hannah said, even if they buy everything up to where we visit him. It never is, Indira, Max said, smiling. The key, though, is not trying to convince them of anything. You sting somebody by getting them to come your way. Follow? Not sure. For instance, if I handed to you that Rayford or Tyson wanted you to do something you didn't want to do, like head straight back to Chicago right now, your first reaction would be negative. You wouldn't want to do it. You'd refuse, and I'd say, okay, then. I can't tell you the rest of it. You'd say, what's that? And I'd say, no, you made your decision, so you don't need to know. Now, I don't know for sure about you, but if I was in your shoes, I'd be all over me trying to find out what the whole story was and whether I made the right decision. You bet I would. I'd wear you down, too. You know I would. You probably would. But see, you'd be coming my way then. It wouldn't be me trying to convince you of something. It would be you trying to drag it out of me. I tell you whatever I need to get you to do what I wanted in the first place. And you don't realize until later, when you realize I manipulated you, that you were stung and it seemed like your idea. Other words, Hannah said, you're going to somehow make these people beg you to take Sebastian off their hands. You got it? And they're going to think you're doing them a favor. Exactly. This I've got to see. You will. And where am I while Chloe's doing her thing at headquarters? Waiting in the Jeep, eyes and ears open. The impression is, yeah, there are two of us, but it takes only one to pick up directions for the boss. And where will you be? Chloe said. On the phone to Chang and then to the kid at the airport. I want that rooster tail gassed up and ready to go. You going to tell him we'll have a prisoner with us? I'll play that by ear. If we don't find a weapon in George's car, I got one for him and one for me. And anyway, you've got your sidearms? Think we'll need them? At least for show. There's nothing suspicious about a superior officer bringing armed staff with him on a visit like this. Chang hurried as casually as he could to his quarters during his afternoon break and flew across his keyboard, trying to track his sister. She was better at this than he expected. He wished only that she had let him in on it, so she could have helped pave the way. He could have helped pave the way. Maybe if she arrived somewhere and discovered he had pre-cleared her for transport on assignment, she would know he was watching. Peacekeeper Chow was already in the system. Apparently, he had gotten out of Chicago and found himself a ride to Long Grove, Illinois. Chang was glad his sister had avoided Kankakee and the old Glenview Naval Air Station. Though short-staffed like everyone else, they had been burned by Judites for the last time and were impossible to hoodwink. But Chang had never before seen anything on his system that mentioned even an airstrip in Long Grove. He finally found an executive runway that had recently been reopened for limited commercial routes. With his break time running out, Chang contacted the tower there as a high-ranking official in the GC Aviation Administration, requesting routine confirmation of a peacekeeper from International Security 30 catching a ride on a commercial cargo plane bound for Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Chang couldn't wait for the response and hurried back to his desk. There it came clear that Suhail Akbar himself was interrogating the first pilot to return from Petra. Chang could only assume that the second was also bound for Suhail's private conference room. With a few keystrokes, he activated the bug in that office to record, and later he would download it from the central system. Chloe appreciated that Hannah seemed sensitive enough to leave her to her thoughts on the drive back to Potomac. "You're okay with my doing this, right?" "Makes perfect sense," Hannah said. "If I was going to get checked, this would be the place." Chloe tried to slow her pulse by breathing deeply and trying to doze. It didn't work, but she knew her life depended on what Mac referred to her as her ability to play bored. Irritated was all right if it came to that, but bored would play truest. Squadron headquarters were on the top 3 floors of a 4-story building with an abandoned first floor that appeared to have been some sort of business. One of the men Chloe and Hannah had encountered on the street sat in the dark near the elevator at ground level, smoking and reading by the sliver of a light from the street. He stood when he saw her and saluted. "Elevator's broke, ma'am," he said. "You want the stairs there behind you, as you were." "This is your assignment?" "Yes, ma'am." "Somebody's got to tell people, or they'd wait all day for that thing." "No one thought of a sign?" "Yeah, but the commanding officer wants the personal touch." She nodded. "He's the one I'm here to see. Could you tell him that I'm—" The young man held up both hands. "I have no way to tell him, ma'am. There's a receptionist up there." "Thought you people were understaffed." He shrugged. "Doing what I'm told, ma'am." The stairs led to a dingy, tiled room with about half the fluorescent lights working. No one was at the receptionist's desk, but another peacekeeper began to rise from the end of a tired couch. Chloe stopped him with a wave. "What's your role here, son?" "GC morale monitor, ma'am, and telling people the receptionist is not here." "I can see that." "Well, telling them she will be right back." "How soon is right back?" He looked at his watch. "Supposed to have been 10 minutes ago, so should be any minute now." "Couldn't you just as easily inform Commander Stefanich that Miss Irene is here from Senior Commander Johnson's staff?" "Well, I could, ma'am, but I was instructed to—" "Just do it. I'll take the heat." "Yes, ma'am. Miss who from what?" "Never mind. I'll find him," Chloe said, reaching for the door. "Oh, I can't let you do that, ma'am. Now, please, I'm sorry I forgot your information." "Is your hand on your gun monitor?" she said. "No, ma'am." "Well, yes, ma'am, it is, but not on purpose." "I read my name badge, son." "Read my name badge, son, and get that memorized. Now, all you have to know is Senior Commander Johnson." "Got it. One moment." Chloe shook her head. It was a wonder the GC accomplished anything. The door had barely shut when it opened again, and the morale monitor gestured her in with a nod. He pointed to a glassed-in office in a corner of the floor where the commander sat at his desk. A female underling stationed outside. "I have to get through her too," Chloe said. "Yes, ma'am. That is the commander's secretary." Most of the other desks were empty, and the lights here were intermittent too. It seemed all this commander had were enough people to keep him buffered. Chloe strode toward the older woman in uniform. The woman smiled expectantly, but Chloe swept past her. "Irene Johnson's staff to see Stefanich." The woman had no time even to protest. Nelson Stefanich looked startled and began to rise. "Hi, sorry, sir, but Senior Commander Johnson doesn't have time for me to work my way through all your layers. Do you have some information for him?" "Of course, but—" Chloe whipped out her leather bifold and produced her GC ID card. "What do you need?" "Well, I'd like to visit with Commander Johnson." Sounded Eastern European. She guessed Polish. He sends his regrets. The GC brass would like this handled with dispatch, and we understood you were prepared to sit down, Miss Irene, please. Please, I insist, Chloe said. I had hoped to bring your commander up to speed on the ones we chose for this assignment. We are very proud of excuse me, sir, but we understand zero information has been extracted from the rebel operative. That's just a matter of time. He is highly trained military, and we have been patient to this point. Might I suggest that if your assignees were at the level you say they are, Commander Johnson would have not had to come all this way. Perhaps, but I am happy with what they have accomplished thus far and plan to recommend them for. Do whatever you like, sir, but please send me back to my boss with what he needs to make contact. Stefanak made a show of pulling a file from his desk drawer, but he did not hand it to Chloe. Are you not aware of what happened today? This prisoner became immediately less valuable with the success of the attack. I understood the results of that are not conclusive. If they were, wouldn't it be broadcast internationally? There were technical difficulties. You will learn that millions of traitors are dead, including their leadership. We still don't know where their headquarters are, Chloe said, or how much of the leadership might be left. We have them narrowed to the Carpathian states. Even the rebel would not refute that. Sir, are you refusing a senior commander access to your prisoner? No, because if you are, I will be the first to fall under his displeasure, but you will be next. She rose. I'm already late, but showing up empty-handed, well, I don't mind telling you that is going to fall on you. Here you are, he said, offering the file. Chloe was moving toward the door. You can put in for accommodations for the locals you hired, but you won't be in a position to award them No, please, he said, smiling apologetically. Chloe stopped and looked at him with suspicion. A folder? I don't want a folder. All I need to give the commander are directions to the prisoner. That's what this is. Now here. Chloe stood with her hand on the doorknob, shaking her head. And your people expect us? Of course. She stood with her lips pressed together, squinting at Stefanak. She had come this far. She wasn't going to return to him. Let's have it then, he said, reaching, offering the file. She stared him down. Finally, he sighed and rose and approached her. Chloe snatched the folder and left. And that's the end of chapter 3. Next, we'll be reading chapter 4. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day.